Hello, and welcome to Access Chat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Mike Liebman, who is the Bloomberg's ERG lead for the United States. Mike and I met a few months ago through one of my colleagues, and we're talking about the work he was doing. Immediately invited him on to Access Chat, and it's taken a few months for us to get around making it happen. So really glad to have you here today. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you're doing at Bloomberg, and particularly what you're doing at Bloomberg with relation to disability inclusion? Because I know Bloomberg are big on this topic as being early adopters and signatories of Variable 500.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Mike Liebman. I've been with Bloomberg for 21 years now, and I'm a senior engineering manager out of our Princeton office. And my day job, I head up business intelligence, data warehousing, data management, data governance, risk operations, and a few more things. I have a global team, and I have been the ERG lead well past my 2-year mandate. I think I'm on about 6 years now. So I'm one of the U.S. co-leads for our disability ERG called B-ABLE. I am also the executive sponsor for our disability and tech group. And I got involved because I have a dissociative disorder, complex PTSD. All of the anxiety disorders, a degenerative spinal condition, and a brand new heart condition, which is really fun and scaring me. But I'll work my way through that.
Wow. So you're human for sure. Okay.
Yeah, I am human. Yeah. And actually, when you asked earlier about the story, so I hit rock bottom, 7 or 8 years ago, and went off to some really intensive, mental health support and group therapy. Came back into Bloomberg and was looking for how do I get involved and how do I give back? How do I kind of create that group therapy experience for thousands instead of just 10 people in a room? And that was really kind of the impetus that drove me forward.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
I'm curious when you said, you were wanting to apply technology, or was this in terms of you wanted to apply that sort of collective healing process by creating the ERG?
More the collective healing process. The ERG existed. It had been around a few years before I got involved, but I think the focus had been more on physical disabilities only early on in the process. And I think I came in and brought that mental health and neurodiversity focus to it, which when that happened, it really started to take off.
Yeah. Well, so we've seen within our own ERG, Antonio and both work for the same large organization, that when you start opening up the ERG to the topics of mental health, neurodiversity, the conversations soon expand and the interest grows pretty much exponentially. So I know Deborah's got a question. So
I do have. It's something that I've been thinking about lately because, and I've heard people complain about it. And I, Mike, am also neurodiverse. Probably you figured it out the second you met me. But what's interesting is I'm really, first of all, grateful that you took a very, very difficult time in your life and walked it, processed it, but then wanted to give back to others with this really huge experience that you had. So I want to applaud that, first of all. I also think it's interesting what you said. They had an ERG group because I see it a lot of times, and but it wasn't really active and more focused on physical. And but then you brought in the neurodivergence and the mental health, the PTSD, which so many people, I believe, are actually dealing with PTSD right now, certainly here in the United States. For years, I think, not just in the U.S., any of us that walked COVID, right? I think people are a lot more traumatized than they realized. But at the same time, what I've also seen is sometimes when you bring in different communities, it sort of takes the entire conversation. And I've seen that happen. I'll give you an example to ground it because, once again, don't disagree. I love all of this, but I remember hearing lots of criticism when we started focusing on making sure people with autism could be included in the workforce more effectively. We had a lot of brands step up and say, well, we want to hire people with autism. They make great technologists. They make great quality control. Wow, these are wonderful people. And by the way, that's actually true. SAP was a leader in that, and many other groups as well. But then I started hearing complaints saying, yeah, but what about the rest of the community that also represents sometimes the intellectual disabilities or the cognitive disabilities like Down syndrome or fetal alcohol syndrome or cerebral palsy in some cases, just depending. And so I think what's interesting is, yeah, but these conversations are so powerful and needed so much. And some of it is because we're such a gigantic, diverse community. But so I just wanted to set up the way I was thinking, Mike, but how do we make sure with our ERGs that we really include our entire community when our community is so big and diverse and complicated and also doesn't want to always identify? I'm not saying you know that entire answer, but I just am curious how that some of that is unfolded with your efforts, Bloomberg.
So, well, we covered the kind of the four main pillars for us is mental health, neurodiversity, physical disabilities, and chronic medical conditions. So I don't want to leave that one out. And overall, in our organization, we have about 3,000 members, which is about 12% of our overall community, which is really good. And compared to all of the other ERGs, you're right, it is much wider and much broader, and the stigma still exists into talking about it. And so what we did was progressively, we ended up breaking down the problem. So we do have like our large community, but created a number of sub-communities so that we could pull the people together that really wanted to see themselves in other people. So some of the areas that we pulled out, we have something we call an accessibility task force, which is focused on, the physical disabilities and the accessibility challenges and how can we improve our entire environment there. In no particular order, like eating disorders was an area that we focused on. Like I said, the medical conditions and mental health. We separated, what we found was in the neurodiverse community, there were two communities in there. There were the professionals that were living with neurodiversity, and there were the families that were supporting it. So we kind of broke those two apart to give support in both of those areas. And I do have I have an autistic son as well, who's 24. And then also some other areas like mindfulness and meditation, which is, and stuttering community. So we really looked for, they couldn't go too fine because what we found is that the community was too small. It didn't get enough engagement. So we tried to keep it at a high enough level where people could contribute and create constant communication, but not too small where it just kind of fizzles.
Wow.
And I do hear a lot about like, oh, what can we do to start hiring people with neurodiversity? And I keep saying, what do you mean start?
Right.
250 to 300 people in our, in our neurodiverse environments.
We're here.
That's quite a common situation where sometimes organizations, we need to hire, but they forget to see who is already there, sometimes for many years. What I would like to know, Mike, is how do these communities on the ARGs support the organization to create more products and solutions that are accessible, not only externally, but also internally?
So what we found, hopefully I'm answering your question on this, but what we found compared to the other ERGs, which are focusing primarily on recruiting, hiring, retention, promotion, kind of the standard areas that an ERG focuses on, our focus was just naturally extended into supporting our clients, supporting our products, supporting our facilities, working with legal, ensuring that we have appropriate accommodation, like I mentioned before, working with families. Even as a media company, being able to work with our communications teams on the best way. So what we do try to do, especially through our accessibility task force, is ensure that our employees have a voice in all of those components, which includes our product. I'm not sure if I answered your question,
Right.
so if there was something I missed in there, don't hesitate to.
So I think maybe I'm going to go to the flip side of Antonio's question, because I think what you're doing is right, and ERGs, when they work well, can really inform how an organization operates. At the same time, I think that sometimes there's an expectation from organizations that their ERGs are just going to produce all of this value for them, while the members of the ERGs are having to do this on top of their day job. So how do we balance that so the benefits are equally balanced for the employees, but also for the employer, so that there's we're creating win-win situations?
I wish I knew the magic answer to that one, right? Because it is a passion play for people who are involved in our ERGs to drive forward things that they really care about in an organization. Measuring impact is really, really hard because it's, a lot of our, I think leaders across, any company are looking for what's the ROI on any of this type of work. And it's very difficult to measure because it's a long game, right? What you're trying to do is create a culture over time where you get to hire and retain the best people. And that's a hard thing to measure and show the ROI on. We are working pretty hard to ensure that we give credit to everybody who is highly involved in these, to the point of kind of capturing who's getting involved, ensuring that we as leaders are sending messages up their reporting chain to say, their involvement is helping and here's how it's helping. Recognition is right now the best way to kind of encourage continued participation to drive forward these types of events.
Sorry to ask quite a loaded question, but as someone that's spent a lot of time engaged with ERGs as well, I know that, and particularly when it comes to disability ERGs, and it is driven by passion. Everybody that's engaged is highly engaged and highly motivated to do stuff. But there's also the fact that we're in this because we already are having to put in extra effort because we have a disability. And so some of this is, my question is sort of framed around the idea of burnout and making sure that the spoon theory, making sure that we're not using up all of the ERG spoons doing all of this extra work on top of the day job. So it's also sort of that balance that I think is, as you say, rightly, quite difficult to strike sometimes, because quite often we'll put in more effort than is good for us because we care about this stuff. Deborah, I know your question is, Mike, if I start quite.
But it is a very interesting point that you made. But I also want to take it just a little bit differently, because I'm an American, so I know Bloomberg really well. And I think a lot of our audience will know Bloomberg. But I actually, in the background, Mike, I was asking ChatGPT, what does Bloomberg do? Because I know Bloomberg is about finances, and I know you're the media, but what it told me, some of the things it told me, I did not know. And so I think it would be also interesting for the audience if you could just tell us a little bit more, because what you do for Bloomberg is very interesting. And part of me would not have realized that they would have had employees like you doing those services, just because I'm naive about what Bloomberg really is, because I know it's a family name as well. And, but first of all, I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about just who Bloomberg is. And then I thought what's interesting to me is I'm thrilled that Bloomberg is in these conversations as just a parent, an individual, an American, a global leader. I'm just really glad Bloomberg is in here, because y'all do have a very powerful voice. And so as you're telling us who you are a little bit more, I think it'll show the audience why what you do is so important to our movement of true inclusion and accessibility. So I was just wondering if you would talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So Mike Bloomberg is the founder of the company. It was founded about 42 years ago now. And it was all about creating transparency in the financial market. So 40 years ago, the dawning of the PC era, very early 80s. I'm probably older than all of you, so I remember it well. But the the main product that Bloomberg has is the Bloomberg Terminal. And what that does is it kind of, it is a software product. In essence, we are a technology company. We have over 9,000 engineers that are helping to build our solutions to provide that data and transparency to the rest of the world. We have, offices in probably 128 countries, 90 some offices globally, and really that's what we're doing, is providing this data transparency. We're normalizing it. So financial statements from the US versus China versus, I think somewhere else, South America, it come in different languages and they use different terms and different measurements. So we have a large data team that job is to normalize this data so that you can look at it equally across any kind of organization. And we simplify the process of getting access to the data that you need to make financial decisions. So we don't trade for you, but we provide a trading platform. We provide data that people can use to run their businesses. What is Bloomberg really? To me, it's and Bloomberg is a private company, and almost all of the profits of the company go to the Bloomberg Foundation. And luckily in my role, I get to work with the Bloomberg Foundation to help them analyze their data. Really, it's all about giving back $2, $3, $4 billion a year to causes that really matter to me personally. So everything from climate control to gun control to education to the arts to improving the life and health of everybody globally. So that's really the mission of Bloomberg, and we're really encouraged to get involved in all of those activities to give back and help out the community. Last year, I'm not going to make it this year, but I got to 100 hours of volunteer, and to me that was like a milestone that I could give back that much. I do a lot of it through mentoring, actually mentoring in the disability space with a number of organizations. So that's kind of the way that I turn the way that we're empowered to give back into something that also matters even more deeply.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it's a great explanation of the complexity of the organization, but also the reach that you have, right? And you can actually not just use the money of the organization, but it's the data and the informed decision making to actually build better, more inclusive places and so on. So I know also that you were planning on putting on an event to bring together people from outside of Bloomberg to as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing on that?
Sure. This is one of the things I've been most excited about over the last couple of years. So different from most organizations that I've run across, because we're a technology firm, we, in addition to having ERGs across all of the various D&I domains, we also have in tech communities across those domains. So we have women in tech, Black in tech, Latin tech, out in tech. So when I actually helped start up our disability in tech organization, which also has close to 300 people in it. I was the executive sponsor of that organization and figured as the executive sponsor, I should go out to the Disability in Tech conference, because I know women in tech have the Grace Hopper conference, and Black in tech have Afro Tech in NISBE, and there's Latinos in tech and out in tech, and all of these things exist. And I could not find the Disability in Tech conference. There's lots of tech. Yes, there's lots of tech for people with disabilities, but there is no Disability in Tech conference. So I figured, well, let's make it. And it took me a few years to kind of get it all put together and kind of sell it up the line. We partnered with an organization called Lyme Connect, which is our disability partner in New York City that works with a lot of U.S.-based organizations, and we're rolling it out. So the conference we're going to host the first one, and it will be in New York, April either 29th or 30th. We haven't kind of settled in on that date, and we've started to advertise it from speakers. But the goal of this is not for it to be a Bloomberg event. It is for it to be a disability community event, and trying to create an environment where other corporations or institutions can come together and help continue to drive this forward. That's my exciting thing that I've been trying to do for a few years now.
That's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's really exciting because, this is an area where we disproportionately contribute to the world of tech. I'm just in the process of doing a presentation at the moment and talking about, so I'm building my slides to do this from time to time, and building up the slides, talking about how, disability is essential in the innovation process and the evolution of tech and so on. Now, all of the stuff that everybody's excited about for Gen AI right now, the foundations of that, the only reason that it survived the last AI winter was because there were 3 user groups that persevered when everyone else had abandoned it, and that was doctors, lawyers, and people with disabilities. Right? And so if people like myself and others hadn't continued using speech technologies, maybe we wouldn't have the natural language interfaces that we now have that are transforming the way that we work. So having a conference where disabled in tech, I think it's great. I'm really excited about the prospect, and I think I'm excited about other people getting excited about the prospect and understanding the prospects for innovation, for engaging with this group of people. And I'm loath to say community at the moment because you're forming it. It's a nucleus of a community at the moment, and I hope that it becomes a thriving one, because I think that that's an area where we, as you rightly say, there hasn't been one. I know Antonia's got something to say.
And I think I'm going to adjust to the timing of the conversation that we are in now on accessibility or on inclusion, how we can somehow avoid a kind of a trap where we are talking to ourselves.
Yep. That's why picking the content is going to be really important, right? So I want to really make sure that this is not just people with disabilities talking about accessibility. I want this to be people with disabilities talking about their technical accomplishments, whether it's building airplanes or doing great things in AI and machine learning. Doesn't really matter, but it's really kind of the same thing, the same goal of the ERGs, which is people need to see themselves in others and having amazing accomplishments so that they can be driven to be one of those people, be the next person with an amazing accomplishment.
I think that's so powerful too, because so often we are asked to speak. I haven't worked for corporations in many years, but I definitely was part of the corporate world for 25 years. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about stuff, we're, like you said, we're going to talk about something else, maybe something we're really passionate about, but to be able to talk about my work as a technologist. I personally don't usually talk about that. I am a woman that was a programmer when you didn't see many women in programming. And so I had to really fight to create a technology company as a woman in a still male dominated world. But even at the time, Mike, I didn't realize I was neurodiverse. I had not been, I hadn't been diagnosed. But it's interesting because often we ask them to talk about certain topics. I think it'll be very powerful. Just tell me about your technology. Tell me about what you do. Tell me about how you're using technology to really, perform your work. And because technology is so exciting anyway, but I also really appreciate the efforts that you're making. I'm creating Billion Strong. For years, I've been working on Billion Strong, which is to bring the more than 1 billion people with lived experiences together with pride. It's so hard to do these things because often people still don't want to identify that they're part of the community, and I understand why they would not want to. But I think initiatives like you're talking about is very powerful as well, because, by the way, we are, all of the in tech groups are also part of the disability community because we're so, we're everywhere. We're all humans. So I also wanted to join Neil in applauding those efforts. and let us know how Access Chat can continue to tell the story and help promote it on social media, help you, with speakers. But it would be nice that it isn't just another Disability 101 conversation. It would be nice to see diversity of who we are, diversity of what technology is. There's a friend that we've actually had on. His name is Amit Gauss. And he is a person that has facial differences because of what he was born with. He gets a lot of, all of a sudden I'm blanking on what you call it, but he has facial differences. Well, but he's also done a lot of work working with people that are working in technology on facial recognition, because he has a very different face than a lot of other people because of how he was born. But so it would be interesting as you go down this path to see if you could pull in some speakers that are talking about these things from very, very different, innovative ways, instead of always the same conversations we're hearing at most of the conferences, which are just sort of starting to discourage the community.
So, Mike, how can people know more about the event? Any extra information that you can provide?
Sure. Right now we're in the process of surveying people who are interested in attending and potentially speaking at the event. So I can send you a link or a QR code that will help to advertise it. We have a few hundred who have already kind of reached out. So yeah, I'll provide you all that information.
Hey.
Happy to.
Yeah, let us know how we can help you. We would love to help. That's what we do.
Thank you.
And we appreciate what you're doing too, Mike.
Excellent. And is the intent to, starting in, I think you said New York, which is your headquarters, to then take it on tour? Because, you've got lots of great locations. One of the things that, and I know you said you didn't want it to be a Bloomberg thing, but one of the things that Bloomberg does have is really good locations all around the world.
Including London, right, Neil?
Pardon?
Including London.
Yes, including London. I was in New York.
I was in our London office last week.
Yes.
Yes, the goal is to, hopefully coming out of the first event, create a kind of a board or a committee to help drive it forward for the next one and figure out how do we continue to have it grow and move around the world and get more involvement. Maybe I have big dreams, but Grace Hopper was in Philadelphia this year, which is I'm just outside of Philadelphia. And I think it had 30 to 35,000 attendees. And I'm shooting for 100 in person and maybe 1,000 for the first one virtually. If, 10 years from now we can get double the size of it, I'd be really excited.
Yeah. And don't be surprised if it's a lot higher than that, especially the virtual part, because we see when there is a virtual option, we see a lot more people attending. I think that Zero Project had like 12,000 people attend virtually, for example, and a couple of thousand in person, because that becomes part of the exclusion as well, is that not everybody can travel. Not everybody have big corporations behind them with budgets. So a lot of our community doesn't get to come out and be heard in the same ways because, of just the funding. It's just some realities and stuff that we all deal with.
Absolutely.
But even the other aspect of it with, what's a big part of Grace Hopper is that recruiting opportunity as well. So,
Yes.
Thousands of women are coming to be able to talk to corporations and get jobs. And, while I don't want this to be, a recruiting event, the opportunity, it's a benefit to the community to be able to have a way to connect with these other organizations that are looking for amazing talent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited. I can't wait to see how this pans out. I think that you're right to dream big. And I think that your dreams will probably come true because this is an unmet need. So thank you very much, Mike. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. I need to thank our sponsors and supporters, Amazon and MyClearText, for keeping us on air and keeping us captioned and accessible. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.